Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon all of you, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor to present my paper entitled Practice of Metamorphosis in Jewish Pygmalion before this august gathering. George Bernard Shaw, as we all know, is known by the virtue of his words, use of language carrying his brilliant wit and killing humor, the best use of it most appropriately. It is the inner and deeper meaning of the coded words that come to life when addressed and practiced in the very worldly world of our actual existence. Now, going beyond semantics would be more relevant as each of us live with one another to communicate and interact pertaining to our prescribed social context. What else is pragmatics, if I may ask? We may define it as a branch of linguistics concerned with the use of language in social context and the ways in which people produce and comprehend meanings through language. Trying to give a modern interpretation to mythological story of Pygmalion and his ideal structural woman coming to life, Shaw opened entirely fresh avenues, thus introducing the drama of ideas. G.B. Shaw's Pygmalion runs many levels of pragmatics as Shaw ventured to expose the hidden oddities and absurdities of his native language and its society. Bringing forth his hero, Professor Henry Higgins, a reformer by nature and a linguist by profession and an energetic phonetic enthusiast, Shaw introduces another brilliantly unique discourse in the realm of human life in relation to its community. Professor Higgins' speech addressed to an uneducated poor farm girl, Eliza Doolittle, in response to her capstone English, stirs in her a metamorphosis of social, economic, and literary order. He tells her, "A woman who utters such depressing and disgusting sounds has no right to be anywhere, no right to live. Remember that you are a human being with a soul and a divine gift of articulate speech. That your native language is the language of Shakespeare and Milton and the Bible. And don't sit there crooning like a bilious pigeon." Okay, with a multitude of facets, the pragmatics of heterogeneous classification can be seen through the play. Higgins' determination to teach Eliza the proper use of language develops a pragmatics of relationship between the teacher and the taught. It is not a smooth journey. The stifle strife connecting the two begins and continues to the end. Eliza could not endure the stigma she was, an incarnate insult to the English language. The desire for change in Eliza ignites. The process of transformation and evolution takes momentum in the flower girl, who resolves to dictate her new thoughts, winning a momentary position of a duchess for Higgins and his friend Colonel Pickering, another scholar, and profession of a lady in a florist shop for herself. This cautious development directs her to improve upon her economic and social prominence and prestige. As life had already taught her many lessons of life-saving strategies in her independent days of poverty, she learns very fast the desired English, accepting the new ordeal rather courageously, excelling in her persistence with her new crude master, Professor Higgins. And now she demands to be treated like a lady. She announces to speak sensible only to those who would speak sensible to her. But Professor Higgins, with his stern nature deprived of any sentiments, resolves to remain a block of wood to her as she to him. We also see that Eliza is not the only one receiving instruction. Throughout the play, we find two levels of instruction being imparted. On one hand, Higgins gives phonetic lessons to Eliza, and he himself continues to receive lessons from his old mother, his maid, and Colonel Pickering in regard to his manners and behavior. Colonel Pickering is undoubtedly a foil to Higgins. Eliza later remarks to Pickering, But it was from you that I learned really nice manners, and that it is what makes a lady, isn't it? You see, it was so very difficult for me with the example of Professor Higgins before me. Well, drawing a comparison between Higgins' behavior and her own parental upbringing, she continues, I was brought up to be just like him, unable to control myself in using bad language on the slightest provocation. And I should never have known that ladies and gentlemen didn't behave like that if you hadn't been there. Her real education apparently began with Colonel Pickering. She relentlessly learned never to copy Higgins' manner. The two men are placed in sharp contrast to each other, except that both were only true gentlemen if we see through the words. Higgins never means any harm by his impertinent remarks, though he very well knows the use of language appropriately in social situations. He simply doesn't intend to change his manners. Crippled with politeness ambiguity, it is often reminded to him to be immensely particular in his use of language when dealing with the new people. All his teachings would come to a naught if he were to teach her the language out of the contextual acceptance. Well, pragmatics of cultural and intercultural clashes marks many interesting episodes in the play. Exploitation of various shades between the rich and the poor, the poorly rich and the rich, creates and dismantles possibility and order. Here, shifting of a persona with a class from the old to the new brings about an acutely complicated rearrangement and reconstruction of values. For example, Mr. Doolittle, a dustman, and Eliza's father, when unfortunately subscribes to the middle class, curses his fortune for the loss of liberty. He cries, "Ruin me, destroyed my happiness, tied me up and delivered me into the hands of middle-class morality." With the shift of his class, his world alters. He tells Professor Higgins, "I have to learn to speak middle-class language from you instead of speaking proper English." Well, proper is what seems proper to place, time, and action. We thus find a continued sarcastic undertone running parallel to the Eliza's newly acquired hypocritical English society. The new society demanded a change of appearance and apparel before the linguistic lessons began. Eliza had to go through all. Returning victorious after playing the role of a true duchess, she received no reward or a word of praise from her mentors. Eliza then exhibits her deadly rage by pelting slippers at Professor Higgins. The tragic climax is that she is too much of a lady to assume any profession now. What is to become of her? The story shows several stages of metamorphosis of identity in Eliza. However, having acquired the education, skill, and proficiency, Lady Eliza, I must repeat, Lady Eliza claims her independence from her unfriendly teacher, Professor Higgins. But is Higgins so easy to deal with? Not at all. He would not let the woman, a tower of strength and a concert of battleship, his most majestic creation, fall under the hands of Freddie, a romantic fool, brutally wounded by the threat of Eliza taking up a profession of a phonetics teacher for herself. He tries to convince her to remain a bachelor, very much like him. But alas, she leaves. Higgins has to do without her.
I told you.
All right.
You will seek the shelter of some other place of worship.
I would like to be here my life, same as you.
Woman who utters such disgusting and depressing noise, it has no right to be anywhere, no right to live. Remember that you're a human being, a soul, and a divine gift of articulate speech. Your native language is the language of Shakespeare, and Milton, and the Bible. Don't sit there crooning like a bilious pigeon.
Well, the change after she wins the bet for her teacher.
Nothing wrong with you. I won your bet for you, haven't I? That's not for you. I don't matter, I suppose.
Better slide, please, the last one.
I'll go and be a teacher.
What do you teach in heaven's name?
What you taught me, I'll teach the next.
Ha, ha, ha.
I'll offer myself as an assistant to that brilliant old guest.
That imposter, that humbug, that toadying ignoramus. Did you mind methods, my discovery? You take one step in that direction and I'll wring your neck.
Ring away, what do I care? I do you one day. That's done. You humiliated me, lad. Now I don't give a back for your bullying and your big sport.
Okay, that was again. I don't think so. It's waste of time. Okay, so I would just like to conclude with my last words. Higgins' tragic flaw lies not in his inability to master the rules of social language. It is rather his pragmatic incompetence to some extent which makes Eliza desert him finally. This is what I think. And though his pragmatic dilemma slashed on social acceptance, Higgins' professional competence remains his crowning glory. Nevertheless, the loss of pragmatic competence and mutual empathy between the two creates a space for an unending tale of humanity, and the metamorphosis continues. Thank you and have a nice day.